Well, welcome to you wherever it is you're joining and tuning into this from. Thanks for joining, and whether this is the first episode in the series or you've followed some of the previous episodes, thank you so much for tuning in. The idea of this is for me to provide a little look behind the scenes at a real day or week, because I tend to summarize what I've done across a week in the life of a graphic designer, a freelance graphic designer as I am. So I hope this is helpful to you. I hope whatever stage you're at in your career, whether you're perhaps just studying, thinking about becoming a graphic designer, and you'd like to see what's actually involved week to week in doing this, or whether maybe you're quite far along in your career, but you'd like to compare and see how others are doing. Whatever's brought you here, I hope this is valuable to you. And I've prepared a few things that I can share with you in this episode. I'm going to swap it now, and I'll share my desktop here. And two projects in particular I've really enjoyed working on over the past month, but they've kind of come to a point where this is the end product now this week. So the first I can share with you is this project here, Yosai. So that's a Japanese name. It's quite a rich meaning behind it, but this is actually a brand that's going to be a line of luxury candles, and they'll be retailed in France. So if you look closely, the writing on these is actually written in French. So this is the end mock-up I create. I use Adobe Dimensions for that. So you don't need to have any kind of knowledge of 3D modeling. You can literally create your artwork to scale, and it's drag and drop. You can edit the lighting, you can change textures. So I've found that for packaging projects, this is absolutely invaluable to clients. They really appreciate being able to see, how, for example, these four faces of a box, how they work in context together. Quite hard to see that sometimes from a die line. But let me show you the process behind the scenes. So this is the kind of thing you might see on Instagram, and you tend to think, oh, that's nice, but how do you get from the start, from receiving a brief to creating something like this? Well, I'll flick through the process for this one so you can have a look. I've spent just a little bit of time tidying and presenting this in a PDF. Because this is something I tend to share with a client, and I begin by exploring the brand elements. So in this case, I was given the core brand. The client already had the logo and an initial kind of idea of a color scheme. This is the color scheme here on the top left. So this kind of beige, not quite a gold, and I've suggested changing it to something that's a little more of a regular gold color, but the green and this darker gold, that's all come from the client. So there's the starting point. And I began by looking for complementary fonts. So something that wasn't going to feel disjointed from the actual core logo. And I quite liked this in either upper or lowercase. I thought that really had a nice tone. And often I begin projects exploring fonts. I feel they have quite a strong leaning to what works, what fits the brand or what doesn't. Next often comes color. In this case, I was given most of the colors, but I always tend to start out with those elements. And then where do ideas come from? I'm often asked this. Well, in this case, the collection was to have a botanical theme. So I literally searched in stock imagery collections for the word botanical. Botanical illustration, botanical drawings, and even some botanical photography, which you see in the next page. Sometimes this is just to get inspiration and to set the tone. But in this case, I actually wanted to pull some of these elements and use them on the packaging if I could. Very subtly, but to add something that's a real taste and a flavour of the theme of these luxury candles. So if the theme was botanical, I wanted, even from a distance as you looked at the box, for you to get a sense of that as a consumer. So I've included that there. Unfortunately, we have to add legally CLP labels. If you've ever done packaging design, you'll realize as I do what a pain that is. And then I began just laying out the content I was provided, having a look at how we might divide this up. So obviously we want the logo included on the front face. We want a clear hierarchy so that the first thing your eye goes to is the name of the collection, and then there's a little description of the ingredients included. And this was one idea, just to make sure the text wasn't overwhelming. In such a narrow box, there's quite a lot of text, ingredients and other information that has to go on the back. So these little dividers, I think, potentially quite a nice way to make sure that text doesn't bleed together, and you can kind of segment it in your mind. That was just a version with a green background. And here, so this is where you see the concept come to play, using the image subtly. So for the sides of a box, this was the idea. Maybe a nice subtle tinted image of a botanical garden. And I really liked that concept. That was a contender. And then this was another option. So funny enough, I'm looking at it now, and I've obviously created the end result. This is the illustration we chose to license and use. But here it looks a little bit clumsy and clunky. I think too much attention is drawn to it, and overall it looks quite busy. So I explored, here's the variation I like, and outlined the stroked version. And that's much, much lighter. Also the gold against that charcoal grey, is less contrast there. So that's the kind of effect I was going for. And then an option here where we've incorporated the green as well. So behind the scenes, I'm spending a few hours working on this, and the client would just see, of course, the end result, the concept you propose. But all the different elements I explored, some which worked, some which didn't, that's what realistically goes into this, goes into each project. And then the thinking as well, trying to decide if something's subtle enough, if it's too prominent. I can see Jack has joined. Hi Jack, glad you're able to join live for this one. I never know, because followers are in different countries. So 5 p.m. British time, it's quite convenient for me, but I'm never sure how that pans out for others that want to tune in. But glad you've been able to catch this one. If you've got any questions at the end, Jack, just put them in the chat box now, and I'll come to them just as I'm finishing the stream. So here's another version I explored. So landscape orientation. The thinking here was that sometimes this item of packaging, so it's a box, it's literally got 10 of these little mini fragrance candles inside it. It would likely lay sideways on a shelf. It might be stacked upright, but I think quite likely it would be laid sideways. So this artwork ensures you can actually see the box the right way up as it lays there. And I wanted to try something much more minimalist. So no artwork, no illustration here, just plain colours and text. And another slight variation of that. So that was the work behind the scenes, the initial concepts. And then from that to this version, and I'll zoom in a little if I can, which I've mocked up in 3D, you can see a few things have changed, and I won't bore you with, there were 4 or 5 different stages of small revisions. But you can see some of the text has been omitted, so we now don't list all of the ingredients on the front. The overall dimensions of the box, although we want this design to be versatile, so this could work if there was a much shorter box with, say, just 5 candles. It looks really elegant. I love this long, thin box. I think it works really well. And you can see with the lighting, with a 3D environment, this is the kind of impact the kind of effect we wanted this to have. So I'll be adding this to my portfolio soon. We've signed off on this now, the artwork for this prototype. And yeah, really excited to see what happens with this. It's an exciting brand to work on, and was a pleasure to come on board for this project. So I did promise, if anyone saw the invitation to this live stream, I put that out on Skillshare. I did promise a sneak peek at my next Skillshare course. So I'm going to save that till the end. I'll show you one more of the projects I was working on this month before I do that. But it is a really exciting course. I've put a lot of time into it. I've had quite a bit of help from Skillshare itself. They've given me lots of tips and advice, and there's actually someone I meet with weekly, and she's been fantastic. She's been helping me to kind of really raise the bar and raise the production standard. So I'll come to that. But first, let's jump back to these PDFs. And if you caught the previous episode, the previous live stream, you would have seen me work through in real time the first 6 pages of this PDF. And that was obviously done in Adobe Illustrator. I've just exported this to show you. So this is a brand called the Royal Pooch Boutique. And this is, as I usually do, an exploration of fonts we might use, potential symbols, and then I begin to play with perhaps complementary fonts, different ways we might lay out the logo type, and so forth. So I worked through, I can't remember how far I got during that live stream, definitely up to this point. I think I may even have reached here. And then I went away, and I think it's important to do this. Sometimes clients imagine that you're engaged to work on their project, and that's it. There's no other clients, no other projects. Your phone doesn't ring. You're just focused solely on that one project at a time. Well, the reality is, that's absolutely wrong. Your phone rings, you'll be discussing other projects, and sometimes just logistically, rather than spend, maybe block out a whole day to work on one project, I found it's best to block out just a few hours at a time, work on something, work at a problem, and then leave it. Go away, work on something else, perhaps think about this project, and then revisit it. And that was certainly the case here. And revisiting it, it's amazing. Your brain will sometimes think of a fresh approach, and you'll tackle that problem in a different way. So if I flick through the subsequent pages, here are some of the other approaches I tried. So this was a nice, I think, ultra-modern approach. I think this is quite on trend at the moment. Lots of space between the letters. As light a typeface as you dare use. Really like the look of that. This was something a little more traditional, but very classy. And because we're calling this the Royal Pooch Boutique, I think these concepts are a little better suited than these concepts. These are the kind of concepts that could almost work for any modern brand, but then they're a little generic. It's not a great fit, where this really plays, I think, well on the word royal. And this little technique up here, to use a portion of, if you've got a brand name with 2 separate words, and you don't want to put an ugly space in the center, you can bold one and have the other lighter. So you get away putting them together without a space, but they still read properly. The same with color or tone, but to do it with weight, I think is ideal. In fact, I may have explored 1 or 2 of these concepts, I think, on the previous live stream, but I developed it. I explored the idea of a monogram of some kind. A quick little idea here at how these elements might work together. If there was a symbol based around the R, how might that be used in a prominent way, in a subtle way? It's another exploration of that there. This was a concept I quite liked. I like the double key line. It's quite classy. And this time we've got the brand name in lowercase, but it still works quite well. And the Y in lowercase is quite interesting. And I like the way it dips, over the pooch, almost forms like a U shape. And it just frames it. It fits together really nicely. So that was a strong option. And I usually steer away from decorative elements, but you do want it to be recognizable. So, the crown really highlights that royal aspect, as does the flourish. Some more options here. This I really like. A nice simple monogram. Sometimes monograms, clients think they have to have some kind of clever overlapping, or there has to be something complicated going on. Absolutely not. Some of the time, simple is best, and just some interesting positioning that feels well balanced can be the perfect solution. You don't always have to create the illusion of an overlap, or which works really well sometimes. I've certainly used that approach in many of my projects, but sometimes simple really works best. And I can see Jack's just posted a question. I think it ties into this, so I'll answer it now rather than at the end. Yeah, there is a delay, unfortunately, with the comments. I see it about 30 seconds later. I guess that's my machine processing as I'm streaming, because it's sharing the desktop. So it's not as fast as me just streaming from a camera phone. So do I let my customer pick their favorite logo, or do you usually suggest them directly? Yeah, that's a good question. So it's a conversation. It's a conversation you need to have with your customer, and you would be wise to listen to their preferences. I've never managed to proceed with a logo that maybe was really fitting for the brand, but the customer, the client, hated. If they hate it, if it's really not for them, even though it might be what's best for their business, it's very unusual that they would accept that. So I'll usually try to talk them through the reasons why I think a concept is fitting or not. And we'll have that conversation. And then at the end, I like to think of it that we're making the decision together, rather than the clients just telling me which design they pick. So we act as if we're a team. We bounce ideas off each other. We try to get ourselves in the head of the target audience, and we'll decide which, not just what's my client's favorite color, but which of these concepts is the best fit for the brand. And usually clients are, if you explain it to them that way, they're quite reasonable in trying to look at it objectively. But if they hate it, if it really grates on them personally, then no, they're not likely to accept it. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. This was a design I really liked. You can see the issue here with the space. When there is a space between royal and pooch, it's not quite centered. Although you've got 5 characters on either side, they're different widths. I think the O's are a little wider, quite likely the H is wider. And so because royal is a shorter block than, or is it longer? It's actually quite hard to tell. But one is slightly shorter or longer than the other, and it means you don't get that space in the perfect place. And I wouldn't want to mess up the kerning and reduce the spacing to try to make them equal widths, because then your kerning looks unbalanced. So that's why using some kind of technique to remove that space is so useful in practice. It's one of my favorite hacks. Love this as well. This is kind of a suggestion of a submark we could use. So it could be shown together with the logo type, or this could be a submark that's used as a substitute. So in a place, for example, social media profiles are absolutely tiny. you decide to use this to represent the brand rather than the full logo. So I really liked that. Here's a little mock-up. Being that this is a clothing brand for dogs, I won't explain the background again because I did that on the last live stream. But being this is clothing for dogs, showing a mock-up here where it's embroidered, I think means a lot to clients. And my client here definitely appreciated seeing it mocked up in this manner. So having something a little simpler logo, a simpler version of the logo, a submark, can be quite useful for brands that are thinking of engraving the logo in different situations as well. So if you think of a number of fashion brands that have monograms, that's one solution. Quite often on their clothing they'll feature that monogram, but you could have something else. You could have something like this that works as a monogram would, but this is a little more detailed, and I really like it. Some other options here. We would have had to customize this graphic. I found something, I wanted to try it to see if it worked, but this wouldn't be unique enough to just use out of a box. I would have had to create something from scratch, but I don't think that was the right approach anyway. I'm glad you like the logos, Jack. That's good to hear. Another approach here. This had something to it. Love the simplicity, and what I like is that this communicates the concept so clearly. You've got the R, you've got a paw, and straight away this is a brand for for pets certainly, and as soon as you see the word pooch, it's a brand for dogs. Is it redundant? Do we need to indicate it's for dogs when we have the word pooch in the brand name? Well, perhaps not. And actually, that's one of the reasons we decided not to go for this concept. But it's cute and it's memorable. So sometimes a logo, if you think of famous logos of a Nike swoosh, of the Apple logo, it doesn't say, Apple's logo isn't telling you they make computers. The Nike swoosh, it's not it's not some kind of silhouette of a trainer. It's an indication of their brand, of their values. And so while sometimes an approach like this will work, it's cute, it's memorable, quite often you want to convey the brand's messaging, its tone, its position, rather than just restating exactly what the brand does. So I think that's sometimes a mistake newer designers can fall into. So that's as far as we developed this in the initial concepts, and then I can share the next stage. And this is the concept the client decided with me to develop further, and so we did. So this was a starting point, and we explored a few variations. So we wanted to go back and question whether this was the perfect font. I think it was, but we tried a few different variations. You can see some of these explored here. Something we did like was this element with the word boutique curved underneath. We thought that was quite nice. We wanted to keep this flourishy symbol. It's abstract, but really sets the tone nicely for the brand. And then here we explore closing up that gap. So we've got the two words running together, the curved boutique underneath. And so you can see once you've picked your concept, the next stage, you're not quite looking under the microscope. I'd say that happens after this, but you are going into a lot of detail, and here it's exploring lots of different iterations of that concept to make sure every detail is perfect. You're perhaps not quite fine-tuning, we're not zooming right in and balancing everything, but in essence you want to make sure you've got the strongest possible version of this logo. So that's what we're exploring at this stage. This I really like. I think the reduced contrast, so putting it on You can see the difference, a charcoal versus a jet black background. That does make some difference. I think it softens it overall, and that's really effective. So we've used color, or if this was shown in black and white, it would be tone, to break up the two words there, and that works really nicely. And then tying in with that, slight tweak to the submark, so we've reflected the colors there with the T and the P. And then at this stage, if it's a full brand identity project I'm working on, I'll usually take what I feel is the strongest iteration of the logo, and I'll almost evolve it. I'll pull other elements out of it. So I'll select complementary typefaces. I'll try to mock up how, this is a random generic page that would perhaps appear in some kind of, marketing material. But I just try to show the versatility of the concept and how it might work in practice. So here, this is an application perhaps where the submark could be used, and so on. And I find this is really useful. Clients love to see this, because if we're used to this, we might see just the logo, and straight away we know what a full brand built around that might begin to look like. It's important, I think, to give it shape and show it at this stage to the client, show the range that it has. And of course, any of these options you're trying that work, you want to record those, put them to one side, and then that is what you begin to build the surrounding brand identity on. That I quite like as well. I've mocked it up. No idea how... I suppose you could use two different colours, couldn't you, or thread, to do something like this. That I really like. I think textured paper, this is all this kind of tone that we'd be going for with this brand. Shop signage mock-up. If it were printed in foil. I've actually not come across any printers that can print two different foil colours. It's usually one foil that can be applied across a whole card, and then everything else needs to be printed in regular ink. So I've mocked it up. I'd be interested to see if this can actually be produced, but I love the look of it. Or that would be, in a single foil. Another mock-up here, and that's how we've finished it. So this PDF, on one hand, sending something like this could completely overwhelm a certain type of client, but in this case, I know this client quite well. I know that she appreciates seeing the detail, seeing the different options. So I sent this whole PDF across so she could kind of follow me on the journey, see what I've explored, and see why I'm so excited about the way this has developed. So those are the projects I've been working on most recently. There's a few, unfortunately, and they're paying my bills, but I have non-disclosure agreements, so I'm not able to share those. One or two I believe I can share in my portfolio once they launch, but I definitely can't share them while I'm working on them. So this is what I can share with you for now. There are a few other things that you'll have seen pop up on my Instagram feed, and I continue posting the latest work there. But I hope this is useful as a look behind the scenes at the work that really takes place from week to week. So the last thing I'm going to share with you before I wrap this stream up, and if you have any questions, please feel free to post them in a chat, or if there's anything you've been working on, if you want to send me a link, I don't mind having a look live and can give you some feedback. But otherwise, I'm going to share with you this sneak peek at my latest class. So first of all, before I hit play, the reason I'm so excited about this class is, often my courses will dive in and they'll give you tips, they'll give you value, they'll give you principles you can use, but there's often gaps along the way. My course on brand identity, there's just one lesson on brand strategy, And if you want to find out more, you have to jump into another class and then learn about brand strategy. But this class, in a concise way, so there's still, each lesson is under 10 minutes. There's only 15 lessons, but it takes you through the whole process. So exactly what I would be doing from start to finish on a logo design project. And it explains things along the way, as you'll see in this little sample. It explains the thinking and the principles you need to understand so that you can make the right decisions for yourself. So rather than tell you do this or do that, if you really understand what we're aiming for, then you can apply that to any project and you can succeed, and that will really level up your work. So I'm quite excited to share this. I will be hopefully publishing it, I think, by the end of November, all going well. And stay tuned and look out for that next course. It's going to be a good one. But here's a little preview I can share with you to show you what you have to look forward to. So if you've been following along with the class, by this point you've decided exactly which messages you'd like to communicate. Now let's talk about how we communicate them visually. So when I show this next image, what does it bring to your mind? What message comes into your head when you look at this? Perhaps it's stop or danger. What about this one? Likely this makes you think go. So why is it we have that reaction to the colours red and green within a certain object? Well, it's because we're programmed to think that way. When we see a red light, we automatically think stop. When we see a green light, we think it's safe to go. And that's just one example. In our lives and our cultures, there are many different objects, colours and visuals that we're taught to understand and interpret a certain way. For example, remember the red light we just considered, the fact it meant stop? Well, in this context, red paired with gold actually means something completely different. It indicates royalty, luxury, celebration. And some human experiences transcend culture, they're more universal, and these are particularly powerful for designers. Let's do a quick exercise to illustrate this. What would you associate with this? What word comes to mind? Perhaps ocean? But what emotions come to mind when you look at this? Maybe peace, tranquility. How about this one? You probably think of a word fire. But what about now? Well, maybe in this context you think of heat. It's the common link between fire and chili peppers. It's less specific. And what emotions would you associate with this? Well, for one, maybe warmth or perhaps pain. So it's so important that as designers, we understand both the meaning and the emotional connection between visual elements that we choose to employ. Some values can be communicated very clearly. Other values are a little harder to articulate, such as luxury. And I'm going to leave that there. To see the rest of that, you'll have to wait for November for that course to come out. But as you can see, it's got a slightly different approach to my previous courses. It's much more interactive. It kind of teaches you, each lesson will teach you a tool that you can then use to go away and to work on your projects. But there are little graphics, to tell you stop and pause. There's a workbook you can go through, so you can complete that as you go through the course. So I'm quite excited about it. And if I haven't said so already, really appreciate the help that Skillshare have been giving me, collaborating with me on this. So I'll swap back. There's no need to share the desktop anymore. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's been an absolute pleasure to share this little sneak peek behind the scenes with you. Looking forward to producing more of these courses as time allows. And if there's no more questions, I'm just looking in the chat. No, I think I've answered Jack's question already. So wherever you are, have a great week and weekend, which is just around the corner. And hopefully I'll catch you again in the next live stream.